Hello, everybody. Welcome to Falcons Central Radio Show on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I'm Aaron Freeman, joined by my co-host Scott Karasik. We are back to talk about the Atlanta Falcons. We will discuss the Falcons' loss in Week 7 against the Baltimore Ravens, as well as their upcoming Week 8 matchup against the Detroit Lions, and we'll get to your mailbag questions at the end of the show. This week we have Ty Schalter to help us break down the Lions this week. He is a Bleacher Report writer, and he's our Lions expert this week. So
He's not just any Bleacher Report writer. He's the national NFL lead writer.
yes,
He's like the guy that I want to be when I grow up.
yeah. So we'll be talking about that, and just like last week, we don't have a whole lot to say about this Ravens game because we're trying to keep the show as positive as we possibly can. But I do think, Scott, there were a few more positives this week than there were the week before.
I'm going to lead off with the defense looked competent for all four quarters. They allowed 27 points, but I'd like to think that I'm only going to count 20 of them because it was kind of a jerk move by Harbaugh to go for it on 4th and 2 from his own 48-yard line, and then it was just the perfect throw that somehow beat Robert Alford on that play. Not exactly happy about that entire play. But outside of that one play, Atlanta allowed 20 points all game on defense. So it's tough to complain and be like, oh my God, the defense sucks. And you know what they did, Aaron, to look average? They played Jonathan Massaquoi at defensive end.
Oh, okay.
They played your boy at 3 technique all game.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Like I've been saying all year, what they needed to do. So the coaches, your boy Babineau, had a great game. He looked good on run defense. He was in the backfield all day. As a pass rusher, he didn't generate much, but he was eating a lot of double teams so that Massaquoi could destroy.
Mm-hmm.
And that Johnny Mass did. I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, he made James Hurst look like the undrafted rookie free agent that he is.
And when Corey Peters went in, he made John Urshel look like the undrafted rookie free agent that he should have been.
Yeah. And the funny thing about Massaquoi was basically he was beating Hurst on the same move in like the whole first half. It was just basically inside. And basically Hurst would try to set up outside, the normal kick slide. And then Massaquoi would be by him, just beat him with the inside move. And he probably beat him like 5 or 6 times doing that exact same thing and hit Flacco. And it was, the Ravens were like, what do we do? I don't know what to do. Can't stop him. So that was a pop.
3 holding calls.
Yeah.
3 hits. He had 4 hurries by my count, 2 by Pro Football Focus's count. And I thought that Joe Flacco got away with probably 2 intentional groundings that should have been called that weren't. So I was very happy with Massaquoi's game. I was very happy with Corey Peters and Jonathan Babineau and their platoon at the 3 technique all game outside of like 2 or 3 snaps when Goodman and Hageman slid in. Those 2 guys were the only ones playing the 3 technique. Tyson Jackson legitimately played left defensive end all game whenever he was on the field. And he rotated with Goodman, and they actually looked like a decent pairing together in that rotation. I don't understand who kidnapped the coaching staff or if somebody's just smacked them all upside the head and said, get your shit together, but they finally are putting the right guys in the right spots.
Yeah, it was nice to see the Falcons, exploit a weakness on another team's offensive line. We haven't been seeing a whole lot of that this year. We've been, counting on guys like OC and Croy and Jackson and those guys to do those sorts of things, and they haven't been able to pull it off. So, time to get the other guys an opportunity to step up and make those plays. So that was a positive thing to see.
Would you agree with me after watching the last 2 weeks that Massaquoi probably should have played 75% of the snaps all season?
Oh, absolutely. I haven't disagreed with you at that point at all. I think, Massaquoi is by far and away our best pass rusher. And the fact that he was not getting the reps the first 4 weeks, 5 weeks of the season was amazing to me. We've had the debate about coaching versus talent, and that was the one feather in the hat of why the coaching was bad the first 7 weeks of the season.
Now, the other thing I'm going to say, and you may not like it much, but while Massaquoi is not a John Abraham, he's at least the early stages OC. And I think the Falcons would love to have him as that secondary long-term pass rusher because I think he could be that. He could be the Doomerville if they could just get a Suggs.
I will, I probably wouldn't have been as willing to say that a week ago, but after the Baltimore game, I'll go with that, the OC comparison. That's fine with me. I can't dispute that.
They got to get a JPP, a John Abraham, Randy Gregory.
Yeah, sure. We'll go for that. Anybody? Anybody good?
I'm just going with what I've seen. Randy Gregory is the guy who I would take this year out of any of them for that defense. And then on the offensive line, I mean, on the Falcons' offense, was there a bright spot? Matt Ryan had a solid game.
Asamoah some credit because it seems like everybody else is not playing particularly well. We can blame injuries a little bit for Jake Matthews' problems.
And Blaylock as a pass blocker. Outside of that one sack he allowed, they've done pretty well.
Yeah. And I think, it's time to reckon. We're looking for positives here. There aren't a whole lot to sift through. So I think, giving John Asamoah credit because he's basically being what Blaylock was to last year's offensive line, which was not everybody else is playing well. And then, last year we got Hawley at the end of the year. And so now Blaylock's Hawley and Asamoah's Blaylock. So as long as we can get, the other three guys to step up, maybe the Falcons can salvage their offensive line the rest of the season.
Hopefully Harlan Gunn is the guy because I don't think James Stone is.
No.
And hopefully Jake Matthews gets healthy this week because Ziggy Ansah is going to destroy him. And hopefully Gabe Karimi gets benched because Ryan Schrader has outplayed him every second he's been on the field.
Yeah, the tackle situation is, and they haven't been playing great all year long, even when Matthews was healthy and Holmes was healthy. They weren't.
But Holmes was at least a good pass blocker.
Yeah, and it was one of those things where they were able to get by with not the world's greatest tackle play because the interior offensive line was playing so great. And now that Hawley's injured and Stone, we went through cons, two bad games of cons. And now Stone's going to be playing, and I don't see why that's going to be any better. You kind of need your tackles to start to step up, and Matthews has not been doing great, and Karimi hasn't been doing great. And, maybe Schrader is a better fit, I think, in the blocking scheme than Karimi is, and give him an opportunity. It's not going to get any worse.
Well, with the Falcons signing a tackle this week in Jonathan Scott, why don't they move Karimi to right guard? And now hear me out on this.
Okay.
Move Karimi to right guard. Move Asamoah to center.
Okay.
And then have Ryan Schrader play right tackle. And have Stone and Gunn as your game day 6th and 7th linemen. That way you can have Karimi slide out if need be.
I wouldn't have, I think any lineup that you throw at me that doesn't include Peter Kahns and James Stone in the starting five is an upgrade in the offensive line. So, there's no reality that exists where either of those two players are one of our 5 best offensive linemen. So you can just pretty much move Jake Matthews to center and move Blaylock to left tackle. That's a better combination than putting Stone or Kahns on the field. So.
I don't want to see Jake Matthews at center for another 15 years.
Okay.
All right? I want him to do what his dad did and play left tackle for 12, left guard for 2, and then center for 1, and then retire.
Okay. All right. That's fine.
All right. So, Ty, we're going to
Yes.
lead off with a quick question.
Sure.
How confident are the Lions after last week's win over the Saints?
Well, when you talk to Golden Tate got in a little free hit at the prior regime when he said, hey, we showed a lot of heart, we came back, we won, and from what I hear, that didn't happen too often under Jim Schwartz when he was here. And those kind of big comeback wins, he's right, haven't happened a lot for the Lions. And all of the usual hallmarks when you talk about having a good team. Good teams find ways to win when they're not playing well. And the Lions have not won when Matthew Stafford has not played well, pretty much for the entire time Stafford's been there. They've gone as he's gone. And with Calvin Johnson out, Eric Ebron out, Reggie Bush hurt, limited, Joique Bell hurt, limited. Basically all of the weapons that he's supposed to be relying on this year to help him were out in that game, and it was all on him. And he didn't have his best game, but they managed to, stay in it. The defense kept them in it, and they showed a toughness that, it's certainly been lacking in prior years. So I think, confidence-wise, now it's weird. You go to London. Have a weird kickoff time. Everything's out of whack. If you follow NFL philosophy, Joe Bustle on Twitter, his former operations manager for Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they went to London under his thing. And he's like, there's so many little things you can't, even begin to think about. Like, okay, you have to bring your copier across the Atlantic just to make copies, and then you have to bring the adapter for the copier, and all these crazy little things just so that everything can run the way it's used to. So you're totally pulled out of your routine. You're practicing on rugby pitch or a cricket pitch or a soccer pitch or something like that, and nothing is the way you're used to it being. So a lot of stuff gets thrown up in the air, and teams that have mental toughness tend to do better. Teams that are confident in their identity and what they're doing tend to do better. So I'm not in the locker room, I can't speak for them. But what? You're laughing at me.
I'm laughing because teams that are confident in their identity, and I'm a Falcons fan. That's why I'm laughing.
Right.
It hasn't been confident in its identity since 2010. Let's be honest here.
Yeah.
Right, and and even for the Lions, their identity has been Stafford to Calvin, and there's no Calvin. So it's not like there's a rock there, that they can fall back on. They're really having to make do, with some guys that I don't think they were planning on being huge contributors this year. Jeremy Ross and Corey Fuller are really holding it down at the wide receiver spot outside of Golden Tate, and they're kind of having to make do, especially at the tight end spot. Brandon Pettigrew, who was a guy that they really thought could be a do-it-all two-way tight end back when they drafted Stafford, has been kind of not quite do-it-all, and this year he can't get any separation. His athleticism is not there. So Stafford's really got no margin for error when it comes to fitting it into windows. We don't have the Wednesday injury report yet, obviously, it being Tuesday night, so I'm not exactly sure who's doubtful, who's questionable, who's, whatever. But I think if they're going back into this with the same cast of characters again, Stafford's going to have to play better if they want to be confident and if they want to, put this one away and come back to the States on a win.
Okay. Ty, you talked about the travel situation. Since both teams are sort of basically making the decision, let's go out there, Monday night or whatever, and let's spend the whole week there. Do you think because they're going to play, in a weird situation, in a weird week, sort of the normal expectations for this game are thrown out the window, or is it because they sort of balance each other out, then it ends up being the same thing?
Yeah, and that may be a case where because you've got Mike Smith and his coaching staff ingrained there, this is the first year for Jim Caldwell. Both coordinators are first-time coordinators. So Terrell Austin on the defense, first-year defensive coordinator, first-time defensive coordinator. Same goes for Joe Lombardi offensively, and these guys are all, not their first time working together. Campbell worked with Austin, but this is not an established coaching staff where everybody knows their role. This is not an established system where everybody's been working with it. It's the first year, and really, Terrell Austin's not even coaching his system. He's coaching sort of an adapted version of Schwartz's system, because they didn't want to change alignments with the talent that they had. So, this could be a case where they get a little bit more discombobulated than the Falcons because, the message isn't as ingrained, and they don't have that, institutional memory of this is what we're being asked to do every single week, and we can show up anywhere, anytime, and at least try and do it. So yeah, that's definitely part of it. And I think, when you talk about throwing the records out, obviously in the NFL, crazy stuff happens. Even Thursday night, if you look at the results on Thursday night, throwing guys out when you take away, that recovery, and film watching on Monday, the day off on Tuesday, practice back on Wednesday. It's like all of a sudden now you get like one day to look at film, recover from injuries, and then you got one day of practice to install the game plan, and then it's Thursday night. So now they're flying, like you said, they go out there, and like I said, all those usual routines are discombobulated. So teams that are, the Lions have, I would say, just from my understanding, the Falcons have more injuries where they're missing starters, especially on the offensive line. But I think the Lions have a lot of nicks and bruises that aren't going to heal, especially on the offensive skill positions. So when you're looking for guys like Johnson and Ebron and Bush and Bell, they're not going to get a nice 2-day, 3-day recovery to see how they give it a shot on Thursday. They're going to fly out there, and flight has its own weird effects on the body, and recovery time. Did you guys see the new Nike concept of like the Nike athletes flight plane? Nike just did this thing where, like the perfect athlete's jetliner, like, and they have all these like hyperbaric chambers and whatnot to try and eliminate some of the effects of stress it has on bumps and bruises. So a little bit you can throw the records out, a little bit you don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, Miami and Oakland. Miami was trending down, and Oakland had just come off a good game they played, and Miami just completely blew the doors off Oakland. And I think that's, again, reflective of organizationally top-down, the executives, the front office, the support staff, the trainers, how organized are they, how well do they know their jobs. That factors into it a lot more than I think people realize.
So what you're saying is there's a chance.
There, yes, and some of the stuff that you guys are talking about on the defensive line rotation for the Falcons, right now a big problem for the Lions is their offensive line. They got great pass blocking out of guys like sophomore Larry Warford, the right guard. Last year he was a huge surprise, 3rd-round pick, came right in, played at a Pro Bowl level. This year been a big fall off. They've had a revolving door at right tackle, an undrafted free agent they got great play out of last year, Adrian Waddle. He's fallen off, gotten hurt. Corey Hilliard got hurt. They've been just swapping guys around, and right tackle play was a big problem for them against the Saints. And the Saints pass rush has not been anything like it was the year before either. So they're vulnerable there. And when Stafford is hassled, obviously if you've got none of his usual weapons, no safety valves, no outlets, is that going to be struggling? Huh?
When that happens, goes the ball too long.
Yeah, exactly. Holds the ball too long. We get Brett Favre mode engaged. We get sidearm mode engaged. When he's getting hassled, you get the 3rd down. This is the 3rd down. The Stafford drop back, and then and then it goes wide by about 3 yards on the 3rd and 7. That's kind of the when the pass rush is getting to him. That's the kind of thing that you'll see stuff break down. So he's been better about that kind of thing this year. But that's still definitely a place you can attack the Lions. And as we saw against the Saints, they basically had no offense until the 4th quarter and had to do a 2-touchdown comeback late in the 4th quarter to even pull that game out. And again, the Saints defense has been one of the worst scoring defenses in the NFL this year. So you can disrupt the pass if you can hassle Stafford, and Bell and Bush aren't getting it done on the ground, then, you're right there because they're not scoring points either.
I was about to ask about the Lions rushing attack. It does not seem good at all. They're second to last in the league in yards per attempt at 3.1 yards a carry. And you can't blame it all on the offensive line. even though I have seen some Garrett Reynolds playing some snaps out there.
Yeah,
You can't blame it all on him.
Exactly. And, that's the thing when you've got Bush and Bell, again, both hurt, and both of them are kind of feast or famine backs, but it's like down to down. It's like, okay, Bell into the line, 1 yard. Bell into the line, 1 yard. Okay, Bell into the line, bam, 9 yards. And it just kind of depends on whether the offensive line gets their blocks in, whether the second level opens up. And same thing with Reggie Bush. He'll run it out to the sideline 3, 4, 5 times and get 2 yards each time. And then, the fifth or sixth time, that's when he gets it open and breaks it, 10, 20 or whatever. So a lot of times it's a matter of just feeding them even when it's not working and hoping it clicks. And sometimes it's been a matter of feeding the hot hand. One of them will get hot, get into a rhythm, and then they'll feed that guy. And then hope that neither of them fumble, because both of them have struggled with fumbling problems. And it seems like whenever one of them's emerged as the lead back, then they have a bad game with a couple of fumbles, and then they get yanked. So you're right, the run game has not been consistent, and when it's not been there, which has been most of the season, again, more pressure on Stafford, more pressure on the receivers.
And this is where I hope Atlanta sticks into their base defense all game, because I hate to say it, but your receivers aren't really threatening. No. Jeremy Ross and Corey Fuller. I mean, Golden Tate, he scares the shit out of me. But you got Desmond Trufant, who I think could handle Golden Tate pretty well one-on-one, because Trufant's the top 10 corner in the league right now. But when you've got Tate and you've got Corey Fuller, who's meh, and you got Jeremy Ross, who's meh, is Ryan Broyles even playing?
That's a bit of a sore spot locally. Broyles has shown well whenever he's gotten on the field. He doesn't have the explosion and speed the deep speed that looked like that he had coming out of Oklahoma. But for whatever reason, the coaching staff will not put him out there. Ryan Broyles even tweeted a couple weeks ago, when people are holding you back, you got to stay strong, and then they asked Caldwell about it, and he wouldn't address it, that sort of a thing. But, nobody can figure out when the Lions are scraping the bottom of the barrel, and every time they put Broyles out there, he does well, why he's not out there more. So to answer your question, no, he's getting very few looks, very few targets, very few reps, but, he shouldn't be getting so few reps.
So here's my question. Does Atlanta even really have to worry about the third receiver?
You have to worry about Ross is a great returner, a really underrated returner, and he can, in open space, do some damage. The problem is in terms of catch radius, getting open route running, not so much. And Corey Fuller had a fantastic catch. He's great at the boundaries on the sidelines and the back of the end zone. But again, that's when you go back to asking Matthew Stafford to fit it into really tight windows. And that's something he can do as well as anybody, but sometimes he trusts that arm too much, and a lot of times on throws he should make, he doesn't make them. So, I mean, if you go look at Corey Fuller, I think I tweeted, I don't know where he was hiding his stilts, because that ball looked to be about 7 feet in the air. He went up, got it, and came back down, and I don't know how he did, because he's not Megatron. But by all rights, that should have sailed out of the back of the end zone.
Now, your tight ends are a little different. Pettigrew's pretty good, not as a receiver, but as a blocker, he's pretty good normally. And then Ebron, I had a top 10 grade on him. Has he been? Yeah. How has he looked so far this year?
About what you'd expect. The athleticism is there, the ability to get open. He's made a couple of great, circus type catches. He's had some very routine drops, which I think was sort of the book on him coming out was, this is not the most reliable pair of hands. And he's had a couple, he had one touchdown called back because, he lost the handle on it when he was going to the ground, that sort of thing. So it's not just his hands aren't sticky, but sometimes he has trouble holding on to it once he's got it. But he started to get more confident in the offense before he got hurt. And then Joe Fourier is another guy, 6'7", great in the red zone, and was starting to be able to be used a little bit more between the 20s. Again, he's hurt too, so and I don't know what their availability is going to be. Pettigrew's an okay two-way tight end. He probably given his frame, he should be a better blocker than he is. And like I said before, he's lost a little bit of speed, it looks like, because he just could not get open against the Saints linebackers, and the Saints linebackers are not the world's best in terms of coverage in open space. So, there may be again an opportunity there for the Falcons to, if none of those guys are any healthier than they were last week, to maybe commit an extra blitzer or two and not worry too much about getting burned.
Oh, I was just saying run a 4-3 instead of or 4-3 or 3-4 instead of the nickel.
Right, they flex. Yeah. Yep.
Basically what they did against the Ravens.
Yeah, and the Ravens. I'm sorry, Aaron, were you about to jump in?
No.
Oh,
Go
okay.
ahead.
Sorry. It's tough with the Google thing because it'll jump back and forth if you make like the slightest sound. So like sometimes I don't know if you're grabbing the mic or just being there. The Ravens, are a very well-balanced offense and certainly in better form right now than the Lions are. More dangerous with their running game. Justin Forsett's having a great year and been pretty consistent. They've got some depth there with Taliaferro. And then, more weapons. Steve Smith, Torrey Smith, those guys healthy right now as opposed to the Lions receivers we already talked about. So, that's a big challenge for any defense, and especially on a day when the offense isn't there. Keep giving drives back. Keep asking the defense to make stops against Baltimore, and when Baltimore's clicking, they're one of the best offenses out there. So definitely, I would say, an encouraging showing for the Falcons defense, and again, the building blocks are there to do a similar thing to the Lions.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting because I think Desmond Trufant pretty much shut down Steve Smith on Sunday. And Scott and I have talked about this on past shows where we kind of think that the Falcons should start using Trufant as a shadow corner, and especially with the Lions where there is no Megatron, or we're not expecting Megatron to play this week, and
right.
They're down to Golden Tate. This would be a perfect opportunity to get Trufant, see if he can do the same thing to Steve Smith or do the same thing to Golden Tate that he did to Steve Smith, especially since, at least in my opinion, I think when Golden Tate is on his game is very similar to Steve Smith's.
Yes.
So you kind of, you figure that would be a real good matchup for the Falcons, at least in that situation. And if you can take Golden Tate out of the game, then, it boils down to the Falcons stopping the run, which has not been that successful this year. But, hope springs eternal, I guess.
Yeah, no, I was actually just about to say that. Steve Smith and Golden Tate, very similar players in their size, physicality. Tate's underrated, I think, his physicality. People don't realize how much he loves to get into it and loves to fight off jams. And then they do both still have the downfield speed. So, very similar games. And Trufant, his physicality, I loved him coming out. I thought he was a fantastic pick when the Falcons took him. I think great. And like you said, he's coming on having a great year this year. Definitely, if you shadow him with Tate and just dare Jeremy Ross and Corey Fuller to beat you. They might once, they might twice, maybe. But on the whole, that's if you're Mike Nolan, you have to think that's a good bet to make.
So, Ty, we talked a little bit about the Lions offense, and it seems like these last couple of weeks they've just been, getting by, mainly because the defense is basically shut down. Is this basically because they're pretty much 98% Calvin Johnson and 2% everybody else? Is that what we're officially saying now?
Something like that. Obviously, you take a player of Calvin Johnson's caliber, and you guys saw it when Julio got hurt. It changes everything about the way a defense can prepare for an offense. And so when Calvin Johnson is not there to worry about, it just closes so many doors for the rest of the Lions offense. Defensively, obviously the Lions are built around that front four. Ziggy Ansah's coming into his own, being incredibly disruptive. He was the defensive player of the week last week. I think he only played about 35, 40 snaps because he's not 100% either. Sue and Fairley have really developed well. The Lions have kind of challenged both of them to produce, kind of prove it and let them go both into the year on lame duck contracts. And right now they're both playing very, very well, and they're getting good rotational play from guys like Jason Jones at the other end. DeAndre Levy is having a fantastic year at the outside linebacker spot. His athleticism, playmaking. Right now they're running the defense through him since middle linebacker Stephen Tulloch is out. And then they've been scraping together in the secondary. Basically, they got Darius Slay at cornerback, who is fast, and has high points and low points in every single game. Good plays and bad plays, and you can beat him, and he will make some plays. And then the safeties, Glover Quinn, James Ahedebo, both had a fantastic game in this past week. But other than that, they've got Abdul Kudus. They've really kind of had to scrape some guys together. So there's still some practice squatters when you get down to nickel and dime. So theoretically, they've got a very vulnerable secondary. But in reality, right now, the front four is doing so much damage, and the linebackers are playing well enough, and they are still getting some plays from those safeties. So right now, they're the number 2 scoring defense in the NFL, allowing 15 points a game. And it's as a Lions fan, that's just something that we haven't seen here in Detroit in forever and ever, where the offense can fail over and over and over again, and just know defense is going to go get that ball back. And honestly, over the past couple seasons, people who've been paying attention, and watching Lions games have seen this has been a good unit, a developing unit, a very good unit, and a lot of times it would be the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, this $300 million offense isn't converting opportunities, is letting touchdowns become field goals, is letting field goals become punts, and relying on the defense. And then in the fourth quarter, the dam bursts, the offense scores, and the defense lets up 14 points, and so you've been seeing this unit develop now, and I think Terrell Austin's done a really good job of making the pieces gel, and finally seeing some of these freakish talents up front come into their own. From a Falcons perspective, I definitely think you can beat the secondary. They've got the receivers, the height and the speed to be able to get deep on these guys, and Matt Ryan. I haven't broken down as much of his film as I should, but he's definitely, I think, been playing well considering the circumstances between the offensive line, the lack of a running game, and the position he's put in by the defense. Do you disagree, Scott?
I find it interesting that there's this notion that the Falcons have a lack of a running game. It's not that they don't have a running game, it's that they don't commit to the run. They're averaging 4.5 yards a carry. And when you take out Anton Smith's carries, it's still 4.2 yards a carry. They've got a running game. The issue is that they give Steven Jackson the ball way too much instead of their younger backs, their faster backs. And when they do that, those guys actually hit the holes that the offensive line can create, and it just looks so much better. What Atlanta needs to do is just cut Steven Jackson. As crazy as that might sound, either cut him or only use him in short yardage plays where this is where the hole is going to be, run to it, beat the battering ram. Because right now, Steven Jackson's a joke.
And it's tough because I love Steven Jackson, and I thought he was going to be a great fit. Obviously, you didn't know how much he had left in the tank when they signed him, but you thought he had more in the tank left than Michael Turner. And no, not really.
Scott and I disagree on this point. I don't think the problem is Steven Jackson. I think the problem is the defense lets the other teams get in holes so much, and to the point that they're only running the ball like 10 times a game because they basically play from behind, and that puts them in an impossible situation where they're with a bad offensive line, and every play is going to be a pass play. 3rd and 2 is a pass play for the Falcons. And that's another conversation about identity. But I think Steven Jackson is doing an okay job. I think he hasn't gotten help from the fact that he's been running behind Peter Kahns and James Stone the last couple of games, and those guys are not good. So, I think Steven Jackson's okay, but, I don't necessarily think Scott's wrong for saying that the Falcons probably should mix in, more of their younger running backs. Certainly, I think he's 100% right on that, but I don't think Steven Jackson's the problem.
Atlanta is has the fourth least amount of attempts on the ground in the league. If they would just run the ball more, I'm not even saying a lot more. I'm saying like 4 or 5 more carries a game. Just run the ball more throughout the game. Add an extra carry on a 2nd and 7 instead of a pass, and it'll end up being a much better offense. That's all I'm saying.
That's fair.
They're averaging more yards per carry than they have in the Mike Smith era, or actually in the post-Michael Turner era. So you can't always blame it all on the offensive line.
Okay.
So either way, I think we're coming back to, again, I think Ryan's done a good job considering, again, the hole that he's being put in, the lack of a running game to take pressure off him. And I think the opportunity is there for him to capitalize with the weapons they've got. And the run game, Sue and Fairley have both been much better and much more consistent against the run, but they have gotten in trouble in the past when they pin their ears back and try and rush the passer. They do get vulnerable. They do tend to get too far upfield, overcommit, and they can be, if you use trap blocks, draws, and sometimes screens. Although I think Levy on the edge has been helpful in shutting some of that down. The athleticism of Ansa also outside. They're less susceptible to screens than they used to be, but there are the lanes can be opened against that line if they feel like they need to get upfield. So that's something that you can take into account. And definitely once you get to the second level, again, I do think there are gaps in the secondary that can be exploited, either passing or once you get to the running lane. I do think Smith will be able to hit a long one again. So and then special teams, the third phase of the game right now, the Lions obviously have struggled. They left 30 points on the board this year with missed field goals, and that's not something that we can just say is handled because Prater's missed a couple of them too. So there have been, they lost the Buffalo game specifically because they could not make any of 3 field goal attempts. So again, if it comes down to Stafford's not converting, they're not getting the big play, either they're turning long drives and settling for 35, 40-yard field goals outdoors in England. The weather is not known for being fantastic there, especially this time of year. So again, if it comes down to the kicking game, comes down to specialists, that's another opportunity the Falcons might have to have an edge over the Lions.
Well, I mean, Matt Bryant's probably, I'd say outside of Dan Bailey in Dallas, Matt Bryant's the best field goal kicker this year.
For sure.
The one miss that he's had or the 2 misses that he's had all year have been 50-plus yarders, like 55-plus yarders, honestly. So you kind of forgive him when you're like, man, it's a 55-yard field goal. It's a tough field goal, and you're still kicking 4 out of 6 on the season.
It's funny because somehow it feels like over the past few years, kickers have gotten so good that NFL fans and coaches have forgotten, this is hard. A 50-yard field goal is not supposed to be automatic. We still have this idea that, like 45, on grass from the hash. Why he missed it, you should never miss it. It's within field goal range. Okay, but that's still a really hard kick to make. And sometimes I see coaches making decisions based on that, and I'm like, you don't just trot out the kicker if it's within 60 and go, well, that's 3 points. It's something that, and especially the Lions, again, can't show much of any faith in their kicking game right now because you just don't know. And the one Prater made I think it was like 26, and I don't know how he made it. It was a nasty shank that clanged off the upright hard and managed to go in. But look, coming off his ball, and you're like, oh my gosh, he's gonna miss it, and it's tough. So that, again, I'm expecting at least 1 miss from Prater on Sunday. So, it's a hairy situation, and it's cost Lions at least 1 game so far. And again, it's another area where the Falcons have an edge.
So the Matt Bryant kicks that he's missed have been from 59 and 57 yards out.
I'm looking at the 57 one.
So from 55 and in, Matt Bryant this year is 8 for 8. From 55 and deeper, he's 0 for 2.
Nice.
So Atlanta might have the edge on kicker.
Just a little bit.
Probably the only edge they have, but they might have the edge on kicker. And maybe kick returner.
Don't sleep on Ross, though. But
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I'm not sleeping on Ross. I'm just saying Devin Hester's the greatest kick returner of all time.
That's true. Yeah, you can't put Ross over Hester yet, but that's probably tighter than probably most people would think.
I mean, Ross might be going to a Pro Bowl, but Hester's still the GOAT.
Yeah.
Yes. And for the record, the Lions as a team are 6 of 16 on field goals overall. That's
so you guys would you trade your first-round pick for Matt Bryant?
In the NFC North right now, because if you look at the stats, the Lions right now have the 25th ranked scoring offense at exactly averaging 20 points a game. So if you go back and add all those missed field goals as makes, that brings them up to like 24.5 points a game, something like that, and that puts them right up with the Falcons in the 11-12 range, right about there. So that's a huge swing from the bottom third of the NFL up to the top third of the NFL just in missed field goals and scoring.
I think Matt Bryant's worth the first-round pick, even though he is 40 on an expiring contract.
Right. Yes, sure. It's not my first-round pick to give away.
You could just say, you know what, Atlanta, we understand. We've been there. We were 0-16 5 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, Jason Hansen. The rumor was a couple of years ago that it came down to money, and he said it wasn't about money, and Mayhew was standing behind him in the press conference laughing. So I don't know, but to me, I don't know why I don't at least give him a call and go, okay, what's the number, Jason? Like, if we got to do it under the table, whatever. It's just come on back.
We'll give you this much as a signing bonus. Please save us.
Yes, sign please.
That sounds about right.
With Morton Anderson, the year they tried to get Michael Kanan to kick.
Yeah.
It was Prater too. It was Prater, right? So, we get 100-year-old Morton Anderson out of retirement. So I think the Lions might need to take a page from the Falcons and bring Anderson.
Definitely.
Oh, I thought you were saying the Lions need to bring in Morton.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Who at 55 years old probably still could kick a 40-yard field goal.
Oh, I'm sure he could. I'm sure he could.
From 40 and in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Better than 6 of 16.
Yeah. Well, speaking of trading players, what's this talk about Sue getting traded? There's been a rumor for weeks and weeks that there's a possibility that Sue might get traded before the trade deadline.
Well, it comes back down to the cap situation. Right now, he's coming into the last year of a monster deal. They've done a simple renegotiation on twice. I think his cap number is something like $23 million right now. So if they franchised him, I think his cap hit would be like 36. And he's good. He's very good. But he's not that good. Nobody's that good. So right now, I think basically what it comes down to, from reading between the lines. I'm sorry, what, Scott?
It's $28 million.
$28 million. Okay. But from reading between the lines, basically, Sue wants to get paid commensurate to his ability on the field and his marketability, which is his right, and I don't blame him. And I think the Lions, were not willing to pay that much before he proved that he could put a complete full season together, where he could both pressure the passer, put up the big numbers and sacks, and still be consistent down to down against the run. And then also realizing that if he was all of those things and did all of those things, then the amount of money that he would be worth is more than they can probably fit, considering they have Calvin already signed to a massive deal, Stafford signed already to a big extension. They've got a team full of first-round picks that have gone in the top half of the first round for the last 10 years. So, Reef, all those guys have all had big deals. So they have to make a choice. And honestly, I'm really interested to see what Terrell Austin does coming up through the Ravens. Obviously he's not a 4-3 guy. He's not a wide 9 guy. They got Fairley also. They declined the 5th-year option on him, so he's on a lame duck contract. So you don't see them keeping Sue, and you wonder if they keep Fairley. Does he fit in? He doesn't really fit in as a nose. You're playing him as a 5 technique. I don't think so. He's too big.
That's where Jason Jones and Ziggy Ansah actually hold a ton of value. Because if he's a Ravens guy, he's an offset type 4-3.
Exactly.
Where it's the weak 3, the strong 1, the strong 5, and Ziggy Ansah is a 5. Jason Jones can play that 3. You could have even this George Johnson cat play the 3 a little bit, or have him line up outside as an outside rusher. I mean, C.J. Mosley, the defensive tackle, not the great linebacker, he could play a 1 technique if need be.
Sure.
He's about 315 pounds, Devin Taylor could play that 5 technique in rotation. I mean, you've got some talent there. And then that could explain the Ron Reed pick, too. He could play that 3, that week 3 that Kelly Gregg did a great job with.
Yeah, and they've got Kyle Van Noy, the outside linebacker from BYU. He's been stashed on the PUP this whole time, so he's another guy, that second-round pick. He's going to be figuring in there as the outside linebacker. So you can see that transition in action, and I love Sue, cool cat. Obviously done a lot for the Lions and for Detroit, but right now it doesn't look like there's a future there. And if there's not a future there, but again, it comes back to the same thing that scuttles every NFL trade, which is, okay, so who's got the cap room to take on a Sue?
Nobody.
Nobody, and B, nobody who is a Sue away from winning a Super Bowl. So it doesn't make any sense. I don't think there's anybody they could deal him to, anything they could get for him that would make any sense.
The Broncos got a decent amount of cap room. I don't think if they have enough for Sue, but maybe they could find somebody on their team that makes way too much money, not named Peyton Manning or DeMarcus Ware or any of those guys. Maybe they could swap. Maybe one of those DBs they got, the Lions might be able to use. I don't know. I'm NBA trading it, I guess.
Well, yeah, it's NBA trading, Madden trading. Certainly, it makes sense, from an on-field perspective, absolutely. And gosh, I mean, on that Sue with Miller and Ware on either side, that'd be unbelievable. But like I said, it's something that you understand why you'd want to get something for him as opposed to let him walk. But again, I don't see how the math works from a cap perspective with anybody.
You would need $6.6 million worth of cap. And the only teams that could trade for him are Tampa Bay, Oakland. Now, Green Bay could be a realistic fit. New England could be a realistic fit. Seattle has the cap room for him. Miami has the cap room for him. Indy has the cap room. The Bengals, the Steelers, the Titans, the Eagles. I mean, there are some teams out there. The Jets would be scary with him. But they could just keep him and extend him, even if it doesn't make a lot of sense, if he's willing to take half of what he's worth, or half of what he's making, not half of what he's worth, and sign a J.J. Watt contract.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it just comes down to, I think Sue is all about, and I mean, he's a smart guy. Keep in mind, his family's a smart family. His dad was an athlete, professional soccer player. Sister's an athlete. Family's very smart, huge support system, and they've managed him very well. He had the deal lined up with Omaha Steaks, I think, before he even got signed up, before he even got drafted. So they've managed his career very well to this point, and I think they know you only get 1, maybe 2 shots at signing the big second contract, signing the big third contract, and that's the difference between having one big nest egg that you could spend and having that generational money where, boom, okay, the Sioux don't have to worry about money ever again. And I think they're managing, again, absolutely do not blame them. If I'm in the same situation, I would not be sitting here going, how can I take a pay cut to stay in Detroit, which I don't have any connection to other than the fact that they drafted me, So, if that's how it is, if that's their thinking, again, I wouldn't blame them.
If the difference is a couple of million, like $2-3 million between the open market value and what Detroit offers, though, you just take what Detroit offers. Because I would love to see what Sue could do in that Haloti Ngata role.
Oh yeah, and if we're talking about this after the Lions lose the NFC Championship game to the Cowboys, you know what I mean? Then maybe it's a different story. If it's okay, they go 10-6. And they're the wild card behind Green Bay, and they lose in the first round. I think we're back to okay. Well, then where they'll value you. So if you sees himself as being one step away from a title, maybe it's something different. And I don't think anybody doubts that keeping that defense together, get Tulloch back maybe, or move on. I don't know. You get Van Noy and then add a couple pieces in the secondary. That could be a really, really scary unit. But again, it's mind reading at this point.
I think for Sue, if if he hits the market, he's gonna get J.J. Watt, Mario Williams, $100 million. Yep. So I think unless the Lions say we're gonna give you $99 million, you try to hit the market and see what you can get. Because
the Lions give him $99 million, and his first 2-3 year cap hits are, $4 or $5 million a piece from where they are now.
Right.
It's not that big of a deal. Like they can't handle they obviously can't handle a $24 million cap hit, but he's already counting $13 million towards the cap for him now. What's another $4?
Right, but the same thing. It's the same thing. Martin Mayhew, the general manager, has been on this right player, right price thing from the get-go. And guys like Cliff Averill, they had they danced this exact same dance. Well, we'll see about if we can get something done. We're this far apart. Okay, well we're this far apart. Okay, and they stayed that far apart all season long, all off season long. They let him walk, and when Seattle signed him, everyone went, that was the. You guys couldn't come up any higher than that. I think he only got like $5 million, and it was like what, you guys walked over probably only $1 million, and then they went into the season with like literally no defensive ends. Like they drafted Ziggy Ansah, and it's like, we are drafting you to start, and there's nobody behind you yet. There's not a number 2. There's not a backup pass rushing defensive end. You're gonna have to start and play every snap until you get hurt, Ziggy Ansah. And so the Lions have shown absolute willingness to let guys walk over if it's over their valuation. Like, sorry, we'll move on. We're not gonna lock ourselves into a bad deal, no matter how much sense it makes at the time.
That sounds about right.
That having been said, hey, if you can have a Ziggy Ansah there and fall into your lap, obviously, right now he's playing, every bit up to his potential. There are some people who, looked at it, what he has like 8 sacks over 2 years at BYU, and people are like, well, how is he ever going to be, if you can only get 8 sacks in 2 years in college, how can he play in the NFL? But they projected him out, they rolled the dice, and so far it worked out. So, if you're a general manager,
believes that college production doesn't mean a thing when you put a guy out there, because there's guys out there that do. Look at Michael Sam, 12 sacks a year at Missouri in the vaunted SEC, and teams don't even want him because he's not a great athlete.
Right, and he's a tweener, where it's like, okay, if you were a little bit bigger and that fast, that you'd have a different role. If you were a little bit faster and that size, sweet. But again, we've seen it a million times. You and I are absolutely on the same mind here. It's like you gotta know the role, know the type, know what you need, and if the guy has the tools and he has the characteristics and he's got the desire, you can plug him in and get better. And the Lions also have a culture. They've got Jim Washburn there, Chris Kosterek, defensive line coaches, incredibly high intensity there, and you either fit into it or you don't.
Yeah.
Sorry, Scott. I'm detecting laughing and or something about Washburn.
No, I'm just glad that that conversation stayed the way it was. And Jim Washburn is a great coach, and the wide nine is excellent, but I don't see how much longer he sticks around in Detroit.
Yeah, obviously, they've got his kid coaching the offensive line too. It's obviously there's the he can rub people the wrong way, certainly, to put it that way. But like you said, it is what it is, and the defense is playing fantastic, and they've gotten great development out of the front seven guys that they've drafted. So going forward, who knows? I really do think Tara Lawson's going to take this next offseason and try and put his stamp on the defense and get in more guys that fit, and make it more his own. In the meantime, this sort of 1 foot in the Schwartz era, 1 foot in the whatever era, has them allowing 15 points a game. So I'll take it, and Lions fans everywhere else certainly will too.
Quick question about the Lions defensive line. I've heard they like to use stunts, and the Falcons probably, are in the running, in the conversation for probably the worst offensive line in defending stunts. So, will Matt Ryan survive this game?
That's a good question. It'll be interesting to me to see how much the coverage dictates, because Tara Lawson's been a lot more willing to blitz and bring pressure from different areas, and if they've got the coverage more back on their heels and really just, you're probably right that they're going to step up even from usual their stunts and play around with alignment a little bit more and try and get ideal matchups, and rotate more guys to try and make sure they're getting as much of the rush as they can from that front four. It's not going to be an easy ask of Ryan or of the Falcons to overcome that defensive line. But like I said, I do think the vulnerability is there in the secondary. If he can stay upright, if he can get away from the rush, or if you can just take like a 15-yard shotgun snap, like get the long snapper out there and just snap it to him, and they've just got that whole distance to run, and he can just throw it, something like that. If they can get the long pass off, there'll be opportunities there.
Okay, all right. Yeah, against Baltimore, basically the Falcons put together 2 decent offensive drives. One of them was in the first quarter, where basically they just ran screens the whole game just to basically, get the Ravens pass rush out of their lanes, and that was the only chance they had to move the ball. Then they did a traditional drop back, and then on a stunt, McPhee stripped Matt Ryan, so that pretty much ended that drive. And then the last drive at the beginning of the fourth quarter, basically that was the one time that Matt Ryan was able to escape, the clutches of Elvis Dumervil, who was beating Gabe Green like a drum, and basically had a couple of downfield throws. So it's like basically, at least from judging from last week, if the Falcons can't use screens to move the ball or don't get any big plays down the field, their offense isn't going to do a whole lot, at least the passing game. So it's going to be interesting, I think, if the one thing they can use against the Lions in that pass rush is the stunt, or not the stunt, the screens, to sort of see if they can counteract that. And of course, as Scott has talked about with the young running backs and speed, they do have a bunch of running backs, not named Steven Jackson, that are really good at screens, but they've been held back by the fact that Peter Conz is probably the least athletic offensive lineman in the NFL, and a lot of their screens rely on him to, block people that he is incapable of doing. But James Stone is a little bit more athletic. He's not as good as Harlan Gunn, but we'll see how that works out. But I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, well, I think the probability is high that you end up with something very much like the Saints-Lions game was, where you've got 2 talented, theoretically high-powered offenses being held back by their problems in the run game and their pass protection problems, and too often you kind of got the movable object and the stoppable force there, where it was zip zip and then 7-zip for a long time before both offenses finally kicked in the second half. And it may be something like that again, where both the Falcons and the Lions are trying to get into a rhythm, trying to find a way, again, for Stafford to find some way to get it to weapons he doesn't have, and for Ryan and the Falcons to compensate for the four beasts in their face. So it's again, I'm expecting a low scoring game, and there's probably going to be some weird turnover thing, some weird, either kick return, Hester or Ross goes off, maybe a defensive touchdown, something weird is going to happen that first half, just because I feel like the kickoff time and the London thing and all the different weird trends that are going on with these two teams, I just feel like something goofy is going to happen.
So like a Kamal Ishmael interception return for a touchdown, like what happened in the Buccaneers-Falcons game.
Yes, something along those lines. Totally wild. Like, wait, that did not just happen. Rub my eyes. Like, okay, well, I guess.
Although Kamal Ishmael has played better than William Moore did this year, but don't let William Moore hear that.
Nice. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's certainly a very interesting game, and I could see almost any result, just because of, again, the Lions offense has been trending downwards each week and needing more and more heroics from Stafford, and having less and less margin of error for Stafford. So, if Nolan has found the personnel combination that works, like you guys are talking about, and can dial up a great game, we could be in for a long, gray, weird game under the English skies, and again, I think an opportunity is there for the Falcons to win. I do think they do have some advantages. They can take it, they can leverage. On the whole, overall, the strength of the two teams I think is evident, but I can't think that the Lions are thinking they've got this one in the bag, and if they do, they'll almost certainly lose it.
Well, I hope that the Lions are overconfident and that Matt Stafford throws an interception to each one of the Falcons defenders. All 11 of them.
All 11.
That's about the only way Atlanta will win. 33-0 because of interceptions and Matt Bryant.
Field goal. Yes. Yes.
Although, honestly, I'm predicting a 24-17 Lions victory.
I could see that. That sounds about right. I actually think it might be even lower scoring if we're just going around doing things. I could see, 2017 or 17-14, just because, again, the turf conditions are not going to be great. It's funny because I'm a soccer guy, so I listen to soccer podcasts. If you're like the Men in Blazers guys, they're like, America, you guys have such great grass. It's so thick and beautiful. Here we have these wheezing little tiny consumptive blades like kind of sticking up out of the mud. So if it's gonna get muddy, if it's gonna get nasty, I definitely think there's gonna be some weird bounces.
Okay. Well, hopefully it's the Lions fumbling the balls and not the Falcons.
We'll take that.
Don't put it past Busher Bell.
I'm hoping. I'm not saying it will. I'm hoping. If Atlanta wins because the Lions have 30-something turnovers, I'm not going to complain, If Atlanta can score off of a turnover, I'm not going to complain. Atlanta didn't score off a single turnover this past week.
Yeah, it's terrible. I'm basically hoping that Stafford has a 3-interception game and we can get basically 2 Devin Hester touchdowns, because I have no confidence that the offense is going to score any points. If basically I need Devin Hester to have a 40-yard return and get tripped by the punter at the 1-yard line, and then maybe if the Falcons have 4 tries to get that 1 yard, we might score a touchdown.
I disagree there. Atlanta got it this past week. It was just a quick out route to Roddy, and it worked. Okay. I think you can see the same this week. A quick out route to Julio, put him on your fantasy team. If Atlanta is somewhere in the red zone, it's going to go to him. Because they obviously don't trust their 6'10" tight end in the red zone. No one trusts Levine Toilolo. Ever since the first week, he's been dropping passes left and right. He finally got his confidence back against the Ravens, and Ryan barely targeted him. And he's listed as 4 targets on the game, but honestly, 2 of them are just throwaways.
Wow.
They just listed him because he was the tall guy standing near the 10-foot pass.
Right.
Yep. And he was wide open on that 4th and 1 play that they didn't convert.
Oh, he was wide open, and he probably would have caught it because, I don't know, he put stickum on his gloves this week or something, but...
Scott, you want to get into these mailbag questions?
Yeah, we got about 5, so why not?
All right, Ty, bear with us. Dave Kent asks, why don't the Atlanta Falcons try onside kicks and trick plays? It normally helps bad teams win.
Mike Smith.
Yeah. I think any question that says, why don't the Falcons do this, usually is going to boil down to, well, they're not well coached right now, so that's basically it.
Next question.
All right. At D Nad Dez, okay, I don't know. Who are we drafting in the top 5?
Randy Gregory, Nebraska defensive end. Reminds me a lot of Simeon Rice. The dude's a monster. I love watching him play. He's 6'5". He's 245 pounds. He's got room on his frame to add at least 10 to 15 pounds of muscle and get stronger and scarier. He converts speed to power very well. The only reason why he has 4.5 sacks in the Big 12 right now is because teams are triple teaming him the way SEC teams used to triple team Clowney. The dude's a beast. He's got the talent. The issue right now is just that he plays at Nebraska and he's got no help. He's got absolutely no help because he plays at Nebraska, who averages a 3-star prospect every year as their best player. So I think if you put him in Atlanta, you put him next to, Rashid Hageman as a second-year player under the right scheme. You bring in Rex Ryan. You have Massaquoi and Hageman and these guys playing the right roles, and Tyson Jackson playing in a 5 technique, which is what he did this past week and looked okay in. I think the Falcons might actually have a decent defense. They're, to me, a pass rusher and a playmaking linebacker next to Warlow away. And I think Shembo could be that playmaking linebacker if he's healthy. So basically just another pass rusher to complement Massaquoi is what the Falcons absolutely need. I've seen flashes from Desmond Southward. I've seen flashes from pretty much every player from that 13 draft class, every player from the Falcons 14 draft class that's seen the field. I've seen some flashes from. So I've got hope. I don't know how much hope Aaron has, but I've got hope for the future with these players. I just don't see anything this year that's going to say anything more than an average defense.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you on. I haven't had the opportunity to see Gregory play. I need to get on that. But any pass rusher, I'm all in on that. I agree with you. I think there are flashes. There's reason to be optimistic about some of these players. But at this point, I think the Falcons just basically need to get as much talent on their defense as they can. They really did not do a great job over the last 7 years getting a lot of talented players. And basically, outside Trufant, outside Alford, and Massaquoi, I guess, pretty much you can find a starter at pretty much the other 8 spots, and I'd be for it. So,
that's where I think Peters and Hageman and, I think there's talent there with Peters and Hageman and Goodman and Warlow and, Bartu's a decent strong side linebacker if they would finally bench Bierman, but they're never going to bench that guy. I think he's got naked pictures of Mike Smith somewhere because there's just no way that he has no reason to start right now other than the fact that he's got a TV show. I wouldn't start him. I honestly would have cut him going into the season. Cut him and Osi and put all the money that they were making toward Michael Johnson. But, again, I wasn't the GM.
Okay. Andrew Scheiwaller has another draft question. If Todd Gurley was still available at the Falcons pick, would you take him or still look defense?
Depends on which pick you're talking about. If Todd Gurley's there in the second round, or with that pick that the Lions traded the Falcons for Matt Bryant, sure.
Right. Yes. Yes.
But at the top of the first round, where the Falcons are projected to pick right now, I wouldn't go anything but pass rusher. I'm a Randy Gregory or bust kind of guy, and there's enough talented players in this year's draft that I could see Gregory falling out of the top 10 if the Falcons don't take him. So, yeah. I'm a pass rusher or bust. Give me Gregory, give me Shane Ray, give me Leonard Floyd if he declares, give me somebody who can pass rush. And then in the second round, give me a right tackle so that you can start teaching Lamar Holmes how to play left guard.
Okay. In regards to Gurley, I'm a believer that I'm a adopter of the don't draft a running back in the first round. I'd make an exception for Gurley, but only in the 20s. So unless the Falcons do get that pick from the Lions and are picking in the 20s, or they pick Gregory in the first round and then trade back into the first round to get Gurley because he's there or whenever he's available, that would probably be the only time I would, look at taking Gurley, somewhere between pick 20 and pick 40. If he's in that space, then go out and get him. But any earlier than that, there's no real reason to, in general, I think skill position players are overdrafted in general, even including wide receivers. But unless you need a number one receiver, I don't see the point of taking skill position players in the first round. But yeah, that's about it. Okay. Philip Edwards at Flip Edwards 71 says, I think Smitty should go, but TD should stay. What do you say?
I'm gonna get flack for this, and I know I will, but I agree. Mainly because I think Thomas Dimitroff has brought in a lot of raw talent, and Michael Smith has had no development abilities. Hey, let's take this guy and not play him till his third year and then hope that something happens. Tom Brady said it, Jamal Anderson has said it, Algie Crumpler said it, Tony Gonzalez has said it. The only way to get better as an NFL football player is to go out there and play snaps as an NFL football player. That's the only way to do it. Rashid Hageman is seeing way more snaps than any other Falcons second rounder, not named Curtis Lofton, has. And they wonder why the team sucks that first half of the season when they decide to not play these second round picks. It doesn't make any sense. I say Mike Smith needs to go, period, end of story. Honestly, I would fire Mike Smith and make Keith Armstrong the special teams, the special teams head coordinator right now. I'd make him the head coach tomorrow if it was up to me, because I think he shows more fire than Smith does. And I think he'd understand that he's coaching for his job more than Smith does. And the special teams unit hasn't really been an issue for the Falcons since 2008 when Armstrong took him over. So honestly, I would say Armstrong is the guy that I'd want. And he'd let Dirk Cutter run the offense. He'd let Mike Nolan run the defense. He'd let these guys hang themselves if they needed to. But I don't think they would. I think Mike Nolan runs a great scheme when he's not being handcuffed by Smitty into running the stupid stuff he was running the first 6 games. So, at this point, it doesn't make sense for the Falcons to... And plus, I hate to say this, it'll be easier to replace Mike Smith when Rex Ryan's out there, when Hugh Jackson's available, when Ray Horton's available this offseason for head coaches, when Todd Bowles is available as a head coach. Those are 4 options that I think could come in tomorrow and take this current Falcons team and win probably 6 of the last 9 games with them. So I think Mike Smith is more the issue than Thomas Dimitroff is. way more the issue. Especially if they can keep some of these really good assistant coaches, like Mike Tice, like Brian Cox, like Keith Armstrong, like Tim Lewis, the secondary coach, who coaches the cornerbacks. Robert Alford got burned 2 plays, or later in the game, he had 2 interceptions on the exact same route he got burned on for that pass interference. That's coaching. That's not anything but coaching. So if you're going to have these guys, it's Mike Smith is the problem. And Mike Smith is who needs to go. And Thomas Dimitroff just needs a head coach to come in and pop him and go, hey, I need a pass rusher. You're going to go out and you're going to sign a pass rusher, and you're going to go out and you're going to draft a pass rusher in the first round. I don't give a crap who you get. Just get me the best pass rusher out there. That's all I need. And, I mean, Dimitroff's the kind of guy who works with his head coach. He's not going to say no. He's going to say, okay, let's get a pass rusher. If that's what you think we need for this defense, let's do it. Plus, who would you replace Dimitroff with? What up-and-coming assistant is there right now that you would replace Dimitroff with? Scott Pioli? Scott Pioli is more why Kansas City failed than their coaching was. So, I mean, I hate to say it. I think Dimitroff brings a lot of talent into Atlanta. I don't think Mike Smith understood how to develop it and how to coach it and how to run snaps to coach these guys and turn them into good players. There's no reason why Jonathan Massaquoi should have only played, less than 40% of the snaps the first 6 games of the year when he was obviously the Falcons' best defensive player, not named Desmond Trufant. That's the end of my rant. I'm just frustrated because Mike Smith is... Right. Mike Smith makes a great grandfather or uncle, but at this point he's not an NFL head coach.
Well, I'm glad we brought back the Scott Karasik rant. I think, we're going to differ on this, Scott. I think a lot of the mistakes the team has made has been going on for years, and I think it's a lot of personnel issues. I think if the question was, because the question he asked was, should Smitty go or should TD stay? I think it's going to be Smitty will go and TD will stay. But I think if the answer is if he's asking should they stay or go, I think you kind of need new blood top down from the organization. I just think they've grown stagnant, and I think you might as well just push them all out the door, bring in somebody who will, not draft fullbacks, pass rushers at the beginning, at the top of the draft. Just guys that need to get on the same page, and so I think that's really where the Falcons need to go.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think you can find a coach who is going to be a better coach than Mike Smith. I don't think you're going to find somebody who drafts better than Dimitroff, especially in one given offseason. And really, I think when you talk about coaches, right now in the NFL, I think adaptability is the key. You look at who is successful. You look at who is winning games. It's people that can take the talent that they have and adapt their schemes to fit and put those guys in position to win. You look at Mike McCoy in San Diego, I think, as A1 of that. As he's like, who have I got? How are they best used? I will use them in that way and get the best out of them. And I think, I concur with Scott. Mike Smith's trying to do what he's got, trying to do his thing. And he's got guys on the bench that can help him that aren't helping him, and guys that are not getting better. And I think when you look over the last couple drafts, are filled with guys that I thought were great picks, and filled with guys that are talented, and they're not on the field when the Falcons need help. So I'm gonna concur mostly, but then with Scott, but also Aaron, I think you're right. Right now, it seems a little bit like the Falcons are still in a okay, can we just get back to can we go rewind just like NFC Championship game? We're right there. Can we just get back to that? And it's not something that they can pull back. They got to go forward. And so I can see how you could be in that mode as a Falcons fan of going, you know what, like this just isn't working anymore. These two guys aren't getting it done.
I mean, the main issue that I'm having is that Mike Smith has raw talent like Malachi Goodman, like Rashid Hageman, and then he doesn't play them. You know, let Hageman. I'm not saying give Hageman this super complicated, ridiculous role. I'm saying line Hageman up where he lined up in college as a one-technique defensive tackle.
Yes.
I'm saying take Hageman and just throw him in there and say penetrate for 30 snaps every game so that you don't have to play Paul Soliai 45 snaps a game. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying anything crazy here. And I'm saying do it in the early parts of the game, the first 3 quarters of the game. Let Hageman get 26 of his 30 snaps so that by the time the fourth quarter rolls around, you've got a fresh Paul Soliai who knows what to do in that clutch situation in that complicated 0 and 1 technique role where he can slide over and do the things that he's teaching, you know, Hageman how to do. I'm saying the 3 technique, play Corey Peters most of the snaps and have Babineau come in on passing situations. I'm saying a defensive end and outside linebacker, play Massaquoi and OC in a rotation where it's a 75-25. Just do that all game because that worked this past week. Just do that all game. I'm saying on the other side, bench Bierman because he sucks and play Joplo Bartu in that spot. And play, when they run 4-down linemen, play Stanley Mapanga in that spot or Malachi Goodman in that spot instead. You know, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. I'm saying play a guy who played defensive end in college at defensive end in the pros. Play a guy who played linebacker in college at linebacker in the pros. You know, play a guy who, yeah, he might have played outside linebacker in college, but he's shown he can play inside linebacker in the pros way better in Prince Shembo. Again, not trying to reinvent the wheel here. Put the right guys in the right spots. Don't overexert some of the older players. Don't put Tyson Jackson as a 3 technique when he can't penetrate. Put him at a 5 technique that he's played for the past 5 years. Mm-hmm. Again, just put the right guys in the right spot, and it comes down to coaching. It comes down to Mike Smith being an idiot this year, and honestly for the past 2 years, and not understanding, oh, hey, Jonathan Babineau can't rush the passer as a defensive end. Maybe I should put in this rookie that I just drafted out of the 4th round because maybe he's going to do better. Hey, the run defense isn't doing well. Oh, maybe instead of putting out 3 defensive tackles in a, you know, putting Babineau out at defensive end, maybe I should just switch it up and run more 34 concepts because maybe that'll work better. It's just frustrating watching this defense.
But, you know, Scott, I guess, you know, and I don't want to sit here and go back and forth for another 30 minutes about this, but don't you think some of the issues that the team is having, like playing Jackson at the 3 technique, you know, shouldn't that be something that the front office should be aware of the coaching staff is going to do? Because it's not like Mike Nolan hasn't been a multiple defense. And so when you get a guy like Jackson who can't play a 3 technique, and so isn't part of that the issue? The front office goes out and Scott Pioli comes in and says, oh, yeah, get this guy Tyson Jackson that I drafted in Kansas City who was really good for us, and he really wasn't. And he'll fit your team. And, you know, the Dimitrov is listening to this guy, and he's not a good fit for what they're going to be asking him to do this year.
How do you put it this way? I wanted Lamar Houston.
Same here.
Because I thought Lamar Houston could have played that role. And I thought it would have allowed Babineau to play more of that 3 technique role most of the game anyway. I wanted Outlander to go out there, get Lamar Houston, Michael Johnson, and I was okay with Soliai just because there's no other 320-plus pounder out there this offseason that was available. Did they way overpay for Soliai? Yeah, but and they should have just given Corey Peters Tyson Jackson's money, honestly. He earned it more than Tyson Jackson did. But, again, I digress on that situation.
Yeah, I think you're right, Scott, with the issues on coaching. I can't argue against you and say that, but I think we kind of converge on how much raw talent the team has. I don't think they have that much raw talent. I think they have a couple of really good players and a couple of guys that could be really good in a couple of years. The Goodman thing is, I agree with you. I don't know what they're doing with Malachi Goodman, but we'll see how it plays out. But
Goodman should play left defensive end and should be on the field more snaps than Croy Bierman is. Anytime Goodman is on the field less than Bierman, Atlanta is doing stupid player personnel situations. Bierman shouldn't see the field more than 20 snaps a game. He's a liability. That's it. That's all he is.
I don't want to get another Tyson Jackson rant, but it just seems to me like the minute Corey Peters was healthy, he came in and everything they were asking Tyson Jackson to do, Peters did it better. I thought Goodman was doing everything that they were asking Tyson Jackson to do. He did it better, but Tyson Jackson, he got paid that money, so he's going to play. So what he do?
And that is where a new head coach would come in and go, well, this Tyson Jackson guy sucks. Cut him. And Rex Ryan will be blunt like that. And they'll give Rex Ryan, I think Rex Ryan's agreement in New York is he gets one draft pick every year. And he gets to bang the table, and that's the guy he gets. And 2 straight years, he got like Muhammad Wilkerson and, Sheldon Richardson. Those are the bang the table guys. I think if Atlanta did the same thing, his bang the table pick would be, hey, give me that edge rusher. That's what I want. That's what I need. Because I can make do with these inside guys. But, all right, I think we got one last question, then we're going to call it a night.
Yep. The same guy, Philip Edwards, asks, also, would you like to see Justin Houston or Donkey Kong Sue on the Falcons?
Let's put it this way. If Ndamukong Suh is available, just like if J.J. Watt is available, just like if Mario Williams is available, you at least make an offer. If Justin Houston is available, you at least make an offer. Hell, Justin Houston might come home just to come home. He's from the Atlanta area. He went to Georgia. Why not? I'd honestly rather have Houston than Suh, though. I think Atlanta has talent that they could have a defensive end, or not defensive end, a defensive line. I think they need that premier pass rusher. They need a premier pass rusher and that inside linebacker. And I think Houston could be that guy. And you have Houston be the Terrell Suggs, and you have Massaquoi be the Dumerville. And when one of them drops into coverage, people aren't going to complain, oh my God, Massaquoi's in coverage. Because it'll be, we still got Justin Houston getting after the quarterback.
Yep. Yeah, I can't say anything different. That's it.
But I don't see Justin Houston leaving Kansas City, and I don't see Suh leaving Detroit, honestly.
I think the chances Suh walks probably is a little higher than Houston. I think Kansas City's been maneuvering to keep Houston, and they'll probably end up cutting Holly, but we'll see how that goes.
Also, with Tampa Bay's cap situation, if Suh really just wants to whore himself out for money, and I hate saying this, the Suh-McCoy combination might be a very real thing.
Don't say those things,
Want something that could be better than Booger Sapp and Ward McFarland.
If you say it might come true, don't say that stuff.
Because McCoy is a monster and Suh is a monster, and
it's so funny because those two guys there was so much. I mean, they were like the Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf of defensive tackle. Who is it, McCoy or Suh? Suh, McCoy. Suh or McCoy? McCoy or Suh? And they're both
monsters.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. No, because defensive tackles are not quarterbacks.
Right.
Defensive tackles are much safer evaluations than quarterbacks. You know who's going to be good. You know who's going to be bad. And if the issue is hand usage, you just get a good coach. And I think it's safe to say Jim Washburn's a hell of a coach. And it doesn't really matter with McCoy because he had good hand usage.
Yeah.
His issue was just diagnosing plays, which you only learn by playing.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. The issue with McCoy was, basically all he did at Oklahoma was be a 3 technique, and they questioned whether he could do other things. But if you're a grade 3 technique, why would you ever do anything else? So, yeah.
I don't know. That's the question that I have with what the Falcons are doing with Jonathan Babineau. He's a good 3 technique. Why is he playing 5? Why is he playing 7? It doesn't make sense.
Well, right. We got 9 more shows, Scott, to complain about that, so I guess
save a little.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully Mike Smith gets fired after this week, regardless of what happens. Even if they blow out the Lions, he's not the right coach.
Give him the Lane Kiffin. Give him the Lane Kiffin. Just leave him in London. Just fly the team back. Mike Smith.
You mean do the Dennis Allen? Leak that you're gonna fire him, and then by the time he gets home on that flight, wait, I'm supposed to be fired? And then call him up and be like, oh yeah, I forgot to let you know before the flight took off.
Yeah, right.
My bad.
Good.
All right.
All right, people. Ty, tell people where they can find your stuff.
For sure. Well, I'm on Twitter at Ty Schalter, TYSCHALTER. Obviously at Bleacher Report. Same thing. You'll find me on there. If you want to go visit the screwed up CSS ghost in the shell, it was my Lions blog. It's still there at thelionsandwinter.com. You can check that out and see. I've got about 6 posts in the last 18 months, but it's still there. So definitely check that out. Follow me on Twitter, and you can catch me now on Sirius. It's Tuesdays with Ty on the Sirius Tuesdays, 5 o'clock on the national channel. So that's always a good time.
Okay. Well, people know they can hit us up on Twitter. I'm at FalFans. Scott's at Scott Karasik. Hit up the show at Falcons PFC. Be sure to follow PF Central as well on Twitter. Scott's writing for Bleacher Report. Every week he's got a new post about how the Falcons should use their defensive players correctly. I'm writing for FalFans. I'm writing every week about how, this guy is not good and, basically the same thing. So you'll see the same stuff pretty much week in and week out until something changes. So next week we'll be back to hopefully celebrate a win and Falcons Roundtable next week.
Falcons Roundtable next week.
All right, yeah. So maybe we'll get a coaching change that we'll be able to discuss. We'll see.
Or maybe we'll just have a win that we'll be able to discuss. That's all I really care about.
The problem is, Scott, since we don't play anybody in the bye, if we lose, how are we going to talk about positives?
I mean,
it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough.
Positive would be a coaching change if they lose. Because I don't see any way Mike Smith keeps his job if they're 2-6 at the bye.
Yeah.
We'll go over head coaching candidates in that situation.
Yeah. We'll figure something out.
How do we beat Tampa again? Come on, let's be honest here. If the Falcons lose to Tampa this year, screw it up. Screw it up. That's when you fire Mike Smith. That's when you go, hey, Mike, we got to have that conversation. At the end of this conversation, you're going to retire so that we can keep your assistants. Because some of your assistants are actually good coaches.
Yep.
All right. That's the end of tonight's broadcast before I get into another rant. So.
All right. Thanks, Ty, for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Ty.
My pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you so much for having me on. Had a lot of fun.
All right.